All right, my friends, welcome to Module 2. In Module 1, we introduced you to the two primal forces that have influence in your life, fear and love. We talked about how fear is designed and we have it from birth and it keeps us alive. But then it also limits us. If you want to grow and build a world that you want, you can't exist or just survive in fear. You have to make the choice to step outside of fear's influence and allow love to have the main influence in your life, because this is what empowers you to build the world you want and grow into the person you need to be. So in this module, Module 2, we're going to teach you how to break the chains of fear. Have you ever felt paralyzed by fear? Unable just to move forward in life. Well, today we're going to uproot that fear and replace it with the power of love. There is a system to this. So our brains are naturally wired to focus on fear. But if we don't consciously cut off its influence, it can dominate our life because this is how we are designed as people. So today I'm going to show you how to annihilate fear's influence and allow love to be the thing that leads your life. Because of fear's influence, our brains have a negative bias. They are hardwired for us to focus on negative information as a survival mechanism. Why do you think you're more interested in bad things that happen or great catastrophes? Or why do people gossip? Why in the political arena is it mostly negative? Because we understand that it is the easiest thing for us to gravitate toward because it's natural. Takes the least amount of energy and the least amount of effort. But in today's world, unfortunately, this bias will help us survive, but it will also hold us back. So, my friends, fear is like kudzu. If you've never heard the word kudzu before, it's a plant, it's an invasive species that grows in the southeast United States. And as you can see in this picture, it just covers everything. In fact, it grows at it grows to, in the summer, up to 1 foot per day and literally strangles everything in its path. The only way to kill kudzu is dig up the root. And in the root, you see this thing, they call it the crown root. And from this crown root grows 2 shoots, which we'll get into. And the only way to kill kudzu is to cut it off at its crown root. If you do that, all the vines will die. Well, fear is just like kudzu. You see that crown root there? That's that little bulb that I talked about. And fear is like the root that runs our lives. And in order to annihilate its influence, it has a crown root. Fear's influence grows from 2 main shoots. And think of it as a vine growing throughout our life. The 2 shoots are 2 things: the inner critic that we listen to all the time, and our ability to make excuses. If we cut these 2 things off, fear loses its power over us. So who is the inner critic? Well, the inner critic, first of all, distorts our thoughts when we're too much into our feelings. So you got to understand, as human beings, if we're going to make a good decision, you got to have a combination of thoughts and feelings working hand in hand and in balance. But as humans, we're not always in balance. Sometimes we're too much into our feelings. Sometimes we're too much into our heads, right? Well, when we're too deep into our feelings, our inner critic twists that inner voice into negative, self-defeating thought. So understand, all of you recognize your own inner critic. When you hear it, it's because you're just too much into your feeling. How do you silence the inner critic? There's 3 steps to do that, and here's how you do it. Number 1, live mindfully. Stay self-aware daily. If you're not mindful of what's going on around you, you won't recognize the inner critic. It'll just be something in your subconscious, and you'll just agree with it and keep going on and not even think. But when you're living mindfully, you're going, There's the critic. You recognize it. Second thing you do, this is probably the most powerful and most important thing, and I'm going to tell you this often. You got to laugh it off. Lighten up. If you're just a human being, you got to learn to laugh at yourself. Even though I say we got to have balance between thoughts and feelings to make good decisions, we're not always going to be there. We're going to be too much into our feelings, too much into our heads sometimes. It's just because we're human. So when we do, just laugh it off. Realize that you're too much into your feelings. Lighten up a bit. And when you recognize that, rebalance yourself out with logic. Take a step back, reassess logically at what you think you're hearing. And we'll get into a couple of examples of this. And then laugh how silly it was. It's really just this simple. And it takes you living mindfully so you recognize it and realize when you hear that inner voice that says you can't do this or you're like this or you're this bad, you're just too much into your feelings. That's all. And just go, all right, that's just me being human again. Let's take a step back because this isn't true. The inner critic doesn't exist. Sorry about the pun, but it's all in your head. You're just too much into your feelings. And it sounds like a critic, but it's not. This is not new to you. Have you ever talked to somebody and they misinterpreted what you said? Yes, you have. Have you been on the other end? Somebody else has said something to you sometime and you interpreted a certain way and misinterpreted what they were trying to say to you. It happens to us all the time. This is just you doing it to yourself. You're misinterpreting what you're hearing because you're too much into your feelings. This is all it is. It's nothing giant. Very, very simple. So learn to laugh it off. Then we have excuse-itis. Excuses rise on the complete opposite end. We're too much into our head, too much into our logic. We try to justify things. Excuses are our mind's way of deflecting responsibility and blaming outside things and justifying our shortcomings so that we can live with ourselves. Oh, I couldn't do that because of this, or it's this person's fault, or I'm not good at this, so this isn't going to work. There's always a justification. Why? Just so that we can live with ourselves. But most of it is a deflection of our responsibility. So how do we stop playing this blame game? There are 3 steps to this. The first 2 you're familiar with. Number 1, recognize when you're making excuses. You can do this by living mindfully every day. Otherwise, you don't recognize, oh, I just made an excuse. You can only do that if you're living mindfully and being aware of what's going on around you daily. Number 2, like I said, this is probably the best medicine there is for you. Learn to laugh it off, lighten up, chuckle at yourself, understand that you're just overthinking things. Lighten up so you can regain your balance. And then the third one is own your actions. Say, I'm going to own this. So take responsibility instead of deflecting blame. This is very simple stuff. It's not hard to do, but you got to live self-aware to be able to do this. To keep fear's influence at bay and let love guide us, we've got to start each day with a simple but powerful AM routine. Why? So that we start our day realizing that these are the things that we are going to start practicing. I am going to silence the critic and I am going to own my actions. I am not going to make excuses. And here are steps to your AM routine. Okay, start with a little mantra in the morning. This should only take you 2 or 3 minutes, you guys. You're preparing yourself for today. So just start, close your eyes and really focus and stop and say, you know what? Today, I am going to live mindfully. I am going to live self-aware of what goes on around me. Prepare yourself mentally. Reinforce your commitment to silencing the inner critic and stop making excuses. Tell yourself, today, as I live my day, I'm going to be aware of that inner critic and I'm going to silence. I am going to be aware if I make an excuse and I'm going to stop it and I'm going to own my action. Then just live in balance, just for the day. That's all I ask, one day at a time. Recognize throughout the day when you're slipping into fear and just bring yourself back into balance. By silencing the inner critic and stopping excuses and following a mindful morning routine, you can cut off fear's influence and now let love lead your life. There is nothing you have to do. When you silence the critic and you cut off or you stop excuses, the influence of fear is annihilated and there's no more nourishment going to your life. And by nature, love will take over where the inner critic influenced self doubt. There is no more inner critic influencing self doubt. And now love takes over and it builds confidence. From doubt, you had indecisiveness because you didn't know if you were making the right decision. Now you become decisive. From indecisiveness, you became inconsistent in your actions, and now you have consistency. So by nature, you're going to grow confidence, you're going to be decisive, and you're going to be consistent in all your work. There is nothing you have to do to make this happen. It will happen naturally if you practice these little things. So start practicing these steps today and watch love become the primary influence in your life, replacing fear once and for all. My friends, this is how you break the chains of fear's influence in your life. Once you've done that, and you start practicing that, now we can teach you what choosing love as your guide really means.